Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 127th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's topic is about American socialism. Socialism has been an alternative to capitalism, has been debated on and off in this country for decades. Now, for the first time since the Great Depression, it is being given serious consideration in some quarters. Today, our panel will discuss whether socialism stands a serious chance of replacing capitalism in the United States. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh, President of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Tom Finley, co-founder of the Great Lakes Resource Center. And on his left is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. Bryan, the commonly accepted definition of socialism is a social system in which the means of production and distribution of goods are owned collectively, and political power is exercised by the whole community. Do you think the politicians who claim to be socialists really mean for the ownership of corporations to be taken out of private hands and given to some kind of collective ownership?
Well, I think the answer is at some point, yes. Socialism is always sort of spoon-fed to the population, and you can put any number of words in front of it: democratic socialism, social democrat, but it all ends up being the type of socialism that really doesn't do anybody any good. We have plenty of examples of socialism at work and the failure of socialism. I went to the Democratic Socialists of America website, and Bernie Sanders would say that he's in agreement with these folks. The young lady up in New York that just unseated the Democrat in Brooklyn.
Cortez.
Yes, yeah, she's a proud member of the DSA, and right there in their purpose and their Constitution, they lay it out for you. And pretty much at some point in time, their idea is to replace the economic order that's based on private profit. So I don't know how you get to that. I'm sure it's a slow march towards that. When you start talking about socialism, you also put in your notes about the Nordic model. So I looked that up, and basically, the countries that they point to are homogenous, they're smaller. Everybody touts Sweden. I read up on Sweden, some of the history of Sweden. Sweden started out, and I don't want to bore anybody here, but was one of the wealthiest countries in Europe for quite a long time. They had 50 of the largest corporations, most successful corporations. And in about 1970, the Social Democrats, a left-leaning group, basically came to power. And over a 25-year period of time, they pretty much wrecked Sweden's economy. It's well known, it's historical fact. They laid on all the free goodies that socialists talk about. Equality, they talk, free health care, freedom to do this, freedom to do that. And by almost 1993, Sweden they had devalued their currency twice. They were on their last legs. And a center-right coalition government came into power, and they started to roll back all the free programs, all the welfare programs that the Social Democrats had put into place. And now they have basically, they have almost come back as far as being a successful country. When you talk about, everybody wants to talk about healthcare. That's really one of the main things they talk about. Mr. Sanders, Bernie talks about Medicare for all. The Swedes and the folks in Denmark are very quick to say, please don't do this, because 70% of the medical innovation and the research and development comes out of the American medical competitive environment. They are quick to say that they are dependent upon that. There's very little original thought that comes out of these social orders when they deal with any particular issue. And, you know, I've taken some economics classes. I'm not an economist. I tried to pay attention, you know, in economics. But there's
boring, isn't it?
well, there's always unlimited demand, but there's always scarce resources. And those are some of the issues that come up. The latest that we can point to, and up until about 7 years ago, everybody loved Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela. Bernie Sanders, Sean Penn, all the socialists in Hollywood, all the folks, they just loved this guy. Until now, and he was a moderate. He considered, you know, Hugo Chavez was considered a moderate socialist, democratic socialist, because the people voted for this. And if you remember, I remember distinctly when he came into power, they had already nationalized their oil. What people don't understand is Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia. They just can't get to it because talent, the intellectual talent, leaves the country. It used to be an exporter of food. Venezuela, now they can't even feed their own population.
Yeah.
And the horror stories coming out of Venezuela, they have a shortage of toilet paper. And this took place over a matter of 20, 25 years. So I think there's plenty of examples. We always love to talk about, they throw in Social Security, they throw in Medicaid, they throw in Medicare. And I would say our economy is somewhat of a mix. You know, we have certain aspects, that there are certain aspects that we charge the government to take care of. And we could argue, you know, some of those things as far as how well they work and what would actually work. But I think the end result is that the folks that declare themselves as socialists, in the end, they want to try this experiment again, even though it has been tried in many, many economies, and it just doesn't work.
You got to admit that it sounds good, though.
It sounds great. Take care of everybody. Everybody needs to be. Bernie's latest, his latest thing is comparing what the CEO of a particular company makes and the lowest, and you got in that wage gap, you know. And we can talk about that. But the fact is that, you know, these are always the rallying cries. It's always power to the people, and in the end, it always turns out badly.
Yeah. Well, like Margaret Thatcher said, sooner or later you run out of other people's money.
Exactly. So,
Ron, where do you come down on this subject?
I think it's difficult for a liberal not to fall into buy that whole package, because I think liberals tend to see the excesses on the other side. There's a reason why we need a strong labor union movement, because there are excesses in the management side of capitalism. I think there's a reason why communism was so attractive in the late 30s and early 40s. I think Eugene McCarthy went way overboard fighting it, but in his techniques. But I think there was a reason for that, because of the excesses which were seen in the democratic processes. On the other, however, being a skeptic, meaning that I don't think that anything is real unless you can get good data on it, I would agree with your assessment, Bryan. I think it's pessimistic, but I think it's realistic. And I think socialism tends to lead to oligarchy, just as in some ways capitalism is leading to that too. We have the famous 1% at the upper end, who in a way are kind of capitalistic oligarchs. They're not necessarily in charge of the government, but I think that's the danger in socialism. It's very attractive to look at healthcare, universal healthcare. We all need this. We all need to be taken care of in that way. Social Security, I'm relying on Social Security pretty much. My 401k is pretty much gone at this point. I've outlived my money. So I need this. I need the social nets, and I think those are important. And I think that's something the government can supply. We, as a community, as government, can supply better than individuals or individual corporations.
If this were the old days, your kids would be taking care of you instead.
Yeah. Well, I don't have many kids.
Well, you see, had you known, you'd have had 7 or 8.
Yeah, that's true.
Make sure they stayed in.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a very attractive concept in many ways. I think it's good to try to be very cognizant of where it might lead, where it has led in the past, and if you can combat that in some way and still get some of the benefits out of it without costing too much, and removing this from other ways, other parts of the thing. And I mean, Ohio has some good examples of this right now, and we've got a big rainy day fund. We just made a big contribution to the rainy day fund in Ohio, but we could take a fourth or a fifth of that out and help some immediate needs, you know, and maybe we should. But
I took an approach of more general and a behavioralist, if you will. And my reflection said, since 10, I have been engaged in free enterprise. My brother and I, fish bait business, and before we were 13, 2 other businesses, trapping, and I watched my family and now my grandchildren be successful with this kind of environment. So I can't imagine being in another society. And in my viewpoint, we'd be hard pressed, or the world would be hard pressed, with all the ills we have with the free enterprise system. We have promoted freedoms. We have promoted humanitarianism as a consistent. We've flawed terribly, but it has been a part of our. Here's what really bothers me about looking at socialism, and that is whenever you give someone something for nothing, and that's what's implied with this, free, free, free. It doesn't motivate it, it's an enabling. And enabling then leads to control. And so if you get a government that gets warped, it gets greed driving it, it can lead to dictatorship quicker than I think any other form of government. I am disturbed about our current political people talking socialism because I think it's a ploy to gain votes. It's not thought through at all. So I am very biased toward a free enterprise system and all it affords society and people who want to move forward on their own.
So you don't think if a socialist were elected president that they would really try to implement socialism?
I don't know how they could. It would be an upheaval, an overthrow of our economic system.
Yeah.
And it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Patty, what do you think?
You know, in our country right now, I mean, we have a capitalistic system, but it's really a modified system in that we do, as Bryan mentioned, we do have, you know, Social Security, we do have Medicare, we do have Medicaid, which are socialist programs. And I don't think anyone that rails against socialism would say they want their Social Security taken away or they want their Medicare or Medicaid taken away. And those are important programs, I think. I do believe in universal health care because I feel that that is a right that we have. We need that safety net for our people. And just because someone has the misfortune of becoming ill, they shouldn't be punished because they can't afford to save it. That 401k that you may have saved up very diligently for many years is going to go away very quickly if you do not have something to cover medical care in the event of any type of illness. Do I think it should be the entire system? No, absolutely not. As Tom was mentioning, socialistic governments tend to allow for dictatorships and for oligarchs to come in and to take over the system, and that's not something that we want. However, a strictly capitalistic system tends to deplete the middle class, and you become the haves and the have-nots. And we're seeing some of that today with the decline of the middle class. As Ron mentioned, we do need a strong labor force that will support that middle class. And if you see the depletion of that middle class, then you are going to go on the top and the bottom. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think that perhaps a hybrid of the systems, which is really what we have now in our country, is perhaps the best. You do still have that capitalistic an entrepreneur that is existing in this country that is going to inspire inventions and inspire development, whether it be in the medical field or in technology or whatever that case might be. But you also have those socialistic safeguards that protect your health care and so forth. I might remind people that, for example, Bernie Sanders ran as a Democrat, but he's not a Democrat. He is a socialist. So a lot of times I think those views are automatically thrown to the Democratic Party, and they're not. That's not what that party particularly stands for. So,
when you talk about the depletion of the middle class, what are you talking about? Fewer people in the middle class, or lower wages in the middle class?
It's not even lower wages, it's just the income in the middle class. More people are being classified as lower class and more are higher class, and those that are in the middle class, which was, the backbone of this country for many years, do not exist. That has turned out because of the depletion of manufacturing jobs, of factory jobs, where you could work at Goodrich or you could work at Goodyear and on the line, and you could support your family and send your kids to college where they don't end up with $100,000 debt when they graduate. So that's what I see, is the numbers of people that actually qualify in the middle class has gone down.
One of the things I think that we have a good example, and that is Sweden. Sweden did exactly what Patty is talking about. They did it in 1970-ish. Their left-leaning social democrats came in, and they did pretty much that because they began to see this disparity between these wealthy people that own these companies and their middle class and what they considered their poor. So they did just that. They considered, Sweden has the happiest people and the most healthy people by all accounts, but they also have the highest absentee rate of workers. Nobody works on Friday there. You're considered a loser if you go to work on Friday. They have more people out on disability and government disability, because if you can get 80% of your salary in a welfare benefit, then why work? And so the unintended consequence that the Swedes, and these are a strong, hardworking Nordic people, what they experienced over that 25 or 30 years was exactly the opposite of what they thought they were going to get. And unfortunately, it's taken them, it almost bankrupted their country, and it's taken them from 1993 up until this point in time to regain their footing. They did it on the backs of Ericsson, which, the mobile phones, Nokia, these are some names people realize, people understand.
Volvo.
Volvo and all that kind of stuff. So I agree that there are certain aspects of socialism, if you want to characterize it as and I'm saying, I'm sort of saying maybe we're not defining Social Security, and socialists are very quick to say, no, that is socialism. Social Security is socialism. They want to pick and choose what programs, what they consider socialism, work, when the ones that don't work are the ones that they distance themselves from.
Brian, I'm sorry.
No, Social Security is something that the participants pay for it.
Exactly.
That's not a free gift.
Exactly. And my argument would be, if you gave the worker, the person that's contributing that 7.5%, and the company doing their 7.5%, if you gave them the option of investing their own 7.5%, however they wanted, you would see a much different outcome as far as Social Security is concerned.
Of course, though,
Patty's pension with STRS. STRS is booming because they take that money that Patty's invested and the school system has invested, and they've invested in the markets. Are the markets perfect? No, they're not perfect.
But before Social Security, that was the case, and then when the Depression hit,
exactly,
everybody lost everything, and they lost their homes, and they were sitting on the streets.
And everybody got together, and they said, "How can we create a safety net?
We need a safety net.
A safety net.
Now,
there's a difference between a safety net and a standard of living." Okay.
But that's not what I was. I mean, I'm not saying that we should go to a socialistic country, and I'm not saying that we go to Sweden. Sweden was completely socialistic. What I'm saying is a hybrid where you continue some of these programs that are safety nets, for our people, and that you also have capitalism mixed with it.
But one of the things that bothers me so much, it's intuitively obvious that when you start giving away free things, you destroy incentive.
I want to re-emphasize that. That's my main tenet with socialism or anything that begins to smack of it. That is, you enable when you do that. You don't provide motivation for self-development, self-care, and all of that. You take it away, and it's a psychological, it's a behavioral thing that you can go to the sciences and say, this is not a good strategy.
And I'm not saying free things, but first of all, not everybody has the same opportunity or ability to obtain that large wealth or that large company. There are many things that could prevent a person from doing that, but we do need the safeguards for things that I consider to be basic rights. For example, medical care. So,
well, in the safeguard, I don't think anyone can argue with that, Patty. It's a desirable thing. It strengthens the society, and
it's benevolent, and we're all compassionate people.
Yeah.
Okay?
So it's only when we screw up the principleship of that, and Social Security, as it was originally laid out, would have been fine until government
Started stealing the money.
Taking the money.
Right.
And so a fund like the teachers, which it should have been mimicking, it couldn't because the money wasn't
when
there.
Social Security has tried to take over this STRS for many years because they know it's this nice pot of money.
Exactly.
That's
They have
stable
managed that so well. I mean, more power to the teachers. I'm saying when you can retire and take a plop and then still get your monthly pension reduced by a little bit, I'm saying more power to you.
Now, I want to make one other point about how we get manipulated with this. And when we get statements like the wages of the CEO, if we were to look at the wages of that congressman and compare ours, et cetera, we got the same thing occurring. It's just a political thing, again, to point to, and socialism is a good way. Look, we should be more equal. And if you look at, one more point, the middle class, and what really began to erode the middle class was the failure of the unions. They lost purpose, their leadership was corrupt, and the list goes on. They're now weak. What is the impact on the middle class? Same thing. So we had a terrible erosion of the middle class caused by lack of leadership of an organization.
I want to make a comment about CEO salary. It's something that we love to talk about and usually think about the highest paid people and so forth. But I did a little arithmetic one time, and that at one time the New York Yankees infield, on average, earned 5 times more than the average Fortune 500 CEO.
I believe that.
I mean that's 500.
That's true.
We talk about the top 5 or 10, but we don't. There's 500 in the 500.
That's a popular. That is a popular whipping post that the Bernie Sanders of the world love to just beat to death. But when LeBron James, for 4 years, gets $153 million, nobody on the left is yelling and screaming at him because it's like, wow, LeBron, you did it. You go. But you take the CEO who, through Sarbanes-Oxley, his salary, he gets a salary, a decent salary. I'm not going to argue that, but they aligned his compensation to his performance and the underlying stock of that company. So the guy makes, the president of Walt Disney. Nobody, they all, he makes $300 and some odd million. Well, that might have been over 5, 6, 7 years, but nobody's there whipping up on a baseball player, someone in the entertainment industry, Oprah Winfrey. I point to people like Bill Gates. I think more kids need to look at Bill Gates and say, how did that guy become a billionaire? He dropped out of college. He had an idea. Capitalism worked. Billions of people bought his product. That's where he's at.
I wonder how far he would have gone with that innovation if he knew that if he was successful, he had to turn it all over to the government. and not make any
Well,
profit
he's
off
giving
of it.
most of it away
That-
to charity anyway.
That's the
so-
beauty.
Well, he is,
that's
but-
the
Yes.
beauty of capitalists. They
There's-
love.
I'm just wondering too, if we had to do our own investment of our Social Security funds, then the oligarchs are going to be the financial advisors.
I just wanted to point out, well, I don't know that there's a greater humanitarian out there than Bono from U2, lead singer in U2. And I loved his comment. I mean, he puts his time and treasure and all into trying to feed hungry people, to eliminate poverty.
And green causes.
And that I loved his comment. He said, when it comes to poverty, welfare is a Band-Aid. Capitalism is the cure. And capitalism has I mean, look, China, for instance, when they've got some kind of a modified capitalism system, and when they adopted it, they immediately saved millions from starvation.
I don't think anybody here is anti-capitalist, or anyone here feels that a socialistic government is.
You
the
know,
best.
here's another
Yeah.
example that people need to take away. Hong Kong is a rock in the middle of nowhere. They have, well, by all indexes, they have the easiest way to start a business, the freest, it's laissez-faire and everything. Hong Kong is thriving.
Yeah.
Okay, because they are probably more capitalists than we are. You know, they're on the extreme capitalism scale when it comes to it, and people flock to Hong Kong. People are doing their best. They're getting in their rowboats. They're doing everything because they want to get to Hong Kong because their idea of freedom and life and supporting themselves is alive there. So, we've got all these shining stars, and then, we've got socialism, which basically, I mean, it wrecks things as far as I'm concerned.
But Patty said none of us are really socialist here.
No.
Right? The question is, what's going to happen with the Democratic Party when it comes to socialism? Are they going to lean that way over the next 6 years?
I think there are some areas like universal health care and so forth that they are going to lean to. But other than that, no. Now, that's my own opinion.
More welfare. Well, thank you very much. That concludes. We've got 4 zeros on the clock. So
Wow.
well done.